Okay, let's unpack this. Think about the last time a conversation just imploded, you
Oh,
know?
yeah.
You went into it wanting to connect, maybe solve something, and somehow, just a few sentences in, bam, you feel totally misunderstood, maybe frustrated.
Or even hurt, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you're hitting a wall.
Yeah.
Or worse, like you're suddenly talking to an opponent, not a partner.
We've all definitely been there. And in those moments, it feels like, okay, maybe they're being unreasonable, or maybe I just can't get my point across. But
Yeah.
what if the real issue isn't just, personalities clashing? What if it's something more fundamental, something happening inside our brains?
That's exactly what we're diving into today. We've been looking at some really fascinating research on this. It's all about the intersection of neuroscience and how we talk to each other, especially when emotions kick in.
Right. So our mission today is to get a clearer picture, like what is actually going on up there when things go south in a conversation?
Understand the biology behind it all.
Yeah, and figure out how we can navigate those moments better by understanding, well, ourselves,
Right.
our own wiring.
And what keeps coming up is this surprisingly simple idea, almost counterintuitive, really.
Okay.
It's like a single principle, a kind of rule that if you can really grasp it and apply it, it could fundamentally change those tough conversations.
Mm. And the core idea is,
Basically, that there's a specific brain state where words just, they don't land right.
yeah.
They can't. And recognizing that state, that's everything.
Okay, so let's dig into that state. What parts of the brain are we talking about? It really does feel like there are competing forces sometimes when we're under pressure.
Oh, there absolutely are.
Yeah.
Think of your brain having like different operating systems. You've got your sophisticated command center that's mostly your prefrontal cortex, the PFC.
Okay, the PFC.
Yeah. This is the part that handles so much of what makes us, well, human. Emotional regulation, empathy, seeing things from someone else's view.
Complex language, planning.
Impulse control, exactly.
Yeah.
It's the wise, thoughtful part of you.
Yeah. Definitely sounds like the part you want running the show during a difficult talk.
Precisely. But then it's always interacting with a much older system, the limbic system,
Mm.
especially part called the amygdala.
The amygdala.
Yeah.
That's the threat detector.
Got it. Its main job is constantly scanning for danger. Internal, external, doesn't matter.
No.
And when it thinks it spots a threat, could be physical, could be intense emotional stuff like conflict,
It sounds the alarm.
it hits the panic button, basically,
Yeah.
and it hijacks the whole system. Survival becomes priority number one, which means
Oh.
resources and access to that smart, sophisticated PFC.
Mm.
They get drastically cut. Your brain shifts gears, goes into high alert, and defaults to these old survival programs. Fight, flight, freeze.
Or even fawning, trying to appease the threat.
Exactly. That too.
So the part of me that's usually wise and empathetic and good with words just gets shoved aside by the alarm system.
Pretty much.
Temporarily sidelined. And here's the absolute key takeaway from all this. You simply cannot have a productive conversation, you can't connect properly, you can't problem solve effectively when your brain is running on that survival mode, that limbic system drive.
Wow.
The neural pathways you need for connection, for nuance, for rational discussion, they're essentially offline.
Okay, so if my PFC is offline and the limbic system's basically yelling, danger, what does that actually look like
Yeah.
or feel like in a conversation? How would I spot that state in myself or, someone else?
It feels urgent. Everything feels high stakes, maybe dangerous, overwhelming. You lose the ability to see shades of gray, that nuance.
Right.
It might feel like everything the other person says is a direct attack, or maybe you're not even hearing their words properly. You're hearing your own fears laid on top of them.
So you're not processing their message.
No, you're reacting to what feels like a threat.
So like if they say, you never help with the dishes, I might hear, you think I'm a completely useless person. That's a perfect example. You hear the wound or the fear, not the actual content or the need underneath. And the way you communicate changes too.
How so?
Well, you might start using those big absolute words, always, never. Your tone might get sharp or maybe totally flat.
Yeah.
Your logic gets kind of fuzzy.
Yeah.
And crucially, any curiosity about where the other person is coming from, it just disappears. You're in protect mode, not connect mode.
It sounds less like talking to someone and more like, I don't know, like pain just spilling out sideways.
That's a really good way to put it, actually. Emotional pain, feeling unsafe or threatened,
Yeah.
it often leaks out in that state
Mm-hmm.
as criticism, maybe defensiveness, sarcasm, even just shutting down completely.
That's the danger zone, right? Because that behavior is
Something-
almost guaranteed to trigger the other person's threat response. It pushes their buttons, potentially sends their PFC offline too.
Oh, boy, yeah.
And boom, now you've got two people stuck in a threat state trying to communicate. It doesn't work. And this feeling, this state of being completely overwhelmed in a conversation. I know there's a term for that from relationship research, isn't there?
Yes, Dr. John Gottman calls it flooding.
Flooding.
Right. It's when you're so emotionally overwhelmed that your body actually shifts into a clear stress response. Your heart rate might shoot up over 100 beats per minute. Your breathing gets shallow. Maybe you feel shaky or hot or suddenly cold.
Oh, wow. Actual physiological signs.
Absolutely. It's your body signaling system overload. And Gottman's research is crystal clear on this. You simply cannot have a constructive, connecting conversation when you're flooded. It's physically and emotionally unsafe territory for dialogue.
So when you're flooded, that PFC is definitely offline. And trying to operate from that place, like you said, it just creates these really painful, destructive patterns.
It really does. And one of the most common and, frankly, heartbreaking is something often called the enemy loop.
The enemy loop, the one that turns people who care about each other into opponents, how does that usually play out?
Well, it often starts when one person feels overwhelmed, flooded, maybe, and their go-to coping mechanism is to withdraw, shut down. It's their survival response kicking in.
Okay, but to the other person, that shutdown can feel incredibly personal, like rejection, right, or abandonment.
Exactly. So the second person feels that sting, maybe gets panicked by the withdrawal, and they try harder to reconnect. But often, they're doing it from their own activated limbic state.
So they might push harder, demand attention, get louder.
Yeah, trying to kind of force a connection. But that pressure, it lands right on the first person who's already feeling swamped.
Making them want to retreat even more.
Precisely. They pull back further into their shell, which of course makes the second person feel even more unheard, more unsafe. Maybe their fear tips over into anger now.
And they might say something really harsh.
Yes. They become more emotional, maybe say things they later regret, which just confirms for the first person that withdrawing was the right move. And round it goes.
Oh.
Both partners end up feeling totally unsafe, completely unheard, and deeply misunderstood.
It really does make them feel like enemies in that moment, even if deep down they love each other.
It does, because the communication isn't coming from that place of connection or care anymore. It's coming from the threat, from the pain. Their limbic systems are running the entire interaction.
I remember seeing some quotes about this that really hit home. Something like, when you speak from a wound, it will sound like a weapon.
That's such a powerful one. It explains why our good intentions often don't matter nearly as much as our internal state. If you're speaking from unregulated pain, it just lands like an attack, triggering defensiveness and, making the conflict worse.
It fulfills its own prophecy.
Right. And there was another one, I think, from Terry Real. Unbridled self-expression is not intimacy. It's a kind of verbal vomit.
That's blunt.
It is, but it cuts through that idea that you should just let it all out no matter what. Because if you're dysregulated, what you're letting out might just be unprocessed pain dumped onto someone else.
Yeah.
And that's, well, it's the opposite of building intimacy.
Which brings us right back around to that simple but transformative principle you mentioned at the start.
Yeah.
Given everything we've just talked about, the brain under pressure, the flooding, the enemy loop, the logic behind it feels incredibly clear now, even if actually doing it sounds really hard.
It is deceptively simple. And the principle is this. Only talk when your PFC is online. I am not joking.
Only talk when your PFC is online. Wow. It sounds so absolute, but it's not really about being rigid, is it? It's more like setting a crucial boundary for the sake of the connection itself.
It really is. And the science completely backs this up. Dr. Gottman's research, again, found that couples who learned to take breaks when things got heated. Specifically, he recommended about 20 minutes, because that's roughly how long it takes for that stress physiology, the flooding, to calm down for most people. Those couples were way more successful at actually resolving the conflict when they came back to it.
20 minutes. That gives the brain time to, reboot?
Essentially, yes. It gives the alarm system time to quiet down so the PFC, the thinking brain, can come back online and regain control.
Okay, but the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
How do you know? How do you check in with yourself in the heat of the moment to know if your PFC is actually online or not?
That is the crucial skill, isn't it? Developing that self-awareness. The material we looked at offers a kind of simple checklist you can run through mentally.
Like what?
Ask yourself, can I actually feel my feet on the floor? It sounds basic, but it's grounding.
Okay.
Is my breathing slow and deep, or is it fast and shallow up in my chest? Can I say what I'm feeling right now without blaming the other person for it?
That's a big one.
It is. Can I pause, even for just a second, to really listen if they were to speak? And maybe the most telling one, Do I still genuinely care how the other person feels, even if I totally disagree with what they're saying or doing?
Wow. That last one, that feels like the real litmus test. If empathy's gone, the PFC is probably offline too.
Exactly. If you run through those questions, and the answers are mostly no or not really, chances are high you're still operating from that threat-driven offline state.
So, okay, let's say you do that check. You realize, whoa, I'm flooded. My PFC is definitely not driving right now.
Uh-huh.
What's the move? You can't just storm off, right?
Yeah.
Because we know that can trigger the other person.
Right. So how do you take that necessary pause
Yeah.
in a way that actually protects the connection instead of damaging it further?
Yeah.
This is where conscious communication becomes so important. You use your words to signal what's happening inside you, and crucially, your positive intention. So instead of just walking out,
You say something.
yeah, you might say something like, look, I really want to talk about this, but I can feel myself getting overwhelmed right now, and I need a few minutes to calm down first.
Or even, can we please take a break? Maybe come back to this in, say, 20 minutes.
Yes, absolutely. Or clarify why you need the break. I
Yeah.
promise I'm not trying to avoid you or this conversation. I just need some space to get myself together so I can actually listen properly and talk without, losing it.
That makes sense. Maybe even right now I feel too activated to have a kind conversation. Can we please try again soon?
Perfect. These aren't excuses or tactics for avoidance. They're actually signals of maturity. They show self-awareness and a commitment to the relationship and a commitment to having a better conversation later on.
It makes total sense from the brain perspective we've been talking about, but actually doing it. That feels like a completely different skill set than, frankly, most of us grew up learning.
It absolutely is, because most of us learn communication patterns just by observing, right?
Yeah.
And what we often saw was either, exploding when things got tough or maybe swallowing feelings down until you just felt resentful or completely shut down.
Yeah, not exactly PFC online strategies.
Not at all. But here's the really hopeful, empowering idea that comes through so clearly. We can actually rewire our relational brains. We are not stuck with those old patterns we learned.
Rewire. Okay, that sounds pretty significant. How does that even work? How do you start rewiring?
It starts with practicing some really simple steps consistently. First, just pause. Before you react automatically when you feel triggered, create even just a tiny bit of space.
Okay, pause.
Second, in that pause, try to just name the feeling that's coming up for you. Just identify it internally. Anger, fear, hurt.
Name it. Got it.
Third, take a few slow, conscious breaths. This directly helps regulate your physiology, calm that alarm system, breathe.
Pause, name, breathe.
And fourth, choose your words. Intentionally select language that's designed to invite understanding and connection rather than words that will likely provoke defensiveness.
Choose connection.
Pause, name, breathe, choose. It sounds like building a whole new foundation for how you respond in those tough moments. That's exactly what it is. You're literally building new neural pathways through that repetition, that conscious practice. And this loops back to a really key message we wanted to focus on. It's very possible to change these deep, ingrained patterns.
That's huge.
It really is.
Wow.
This deep dive into how the brain works shows us the problem, that temporary offline state, but also points directly to the solution. Learning to get back online before you engage. And, understanding this framework can be particularly game-changing in relationships where neurodivergence is a factor. Well, think about ADHD, maybe with quicker reactions sometimes, or ASD, where sensory or emotional overwhelm can happen more easily. Recognizing that getting flooded might be tied to different wiring. It allows for so much more clarity and intention, and frankly, gentleness when approaching difficult conversations from both sides. It makes space for someone to say, hey, I think I'm getting flooded, without it being a personal attack or an excuse. It's just information.
That makes a lot of sense. And while knowing that change is possible is incredibly helpful, it's also important to remember this isn't about suddenly becoming perfect communicators overnight.
Absolutely not. And that's the other vital piece of the message we wanted to hit home. We are aiming for progress, not perfection.
Progress, not perfection. I like that.
It's crucial. This is a practice. It's a skill you build over time. There are going to be slip-ups. You will get flooded sometimes. You will say things you regret later.
It happens to everyone.
Of course. The goal isn't flawless execution every single time. It's about moving forward. It's about noticing sooner when you're getting activated, repairing faster when you mess up, and gradually strengthening this muscle of self-regulation and conscious communication.
And there are resources out there to help people learn these skills, right? Like practicing the pause, name, breathe, choose steps.
Definitely. There are therapists, coaches. For example, you might find approaches like those Lindit TCB coaching shares really valuable for learning how to actually apply these ideas in your real life, in your specific situations. It takes practice.
Right. So ultimately, this brain science stuff, it's not just interesting theory. It gets right to the heart of how we build and maintain connection, how we actually love the people who matter most to us.
It really, really does. The material we looked at emphasizes that love isn't just this passive feeling we have. It's about how we show up, how we act, especially when things are difficult.
Mm,
And showing up from that regulated, thoughtful, wise part of ourselves, our prefrontal cortex, that's arguably the most loving way we can communicate, particularly when the stakes feel high.
that quote comes back to mind. The words you choose in pain will decide whether your partner builds a wall or a bridge. It resonates so much more deeply now, understanding the brain state behind it.
It really underscores the power, doesn't it? The power of that core principle.
Yeah.
Only talk when your PFC is online. I am not joking. Because when you're talking from that dysregulated, threat-driven place,
Yeah.
it might feel like you're having a conversation, but it's often, as the source material suggests, really just a cry for safety or an expression of pain that's unfortunately dressed up in words that just push connection further away.
So wrapping up this deep dive then, the key takeaway feels, well, simple, but also incredibly profound. Your brain's state, whether your PFC is online or offline, is absolutely fundamental to effective, loving communication.
Totally.
Understanding when you're offline, recognizing those signs of flooding in yourself and maybe others, and consciously choosing to pause, to regulate before you engage, that's not avoidance.
No, it's the crucial first step.
It's the necessary step to actually transform conflict into connection.
And the truly empowering part of all this is remembering that this is a learnable skill. You absolutely can change those old, unhelpful communication patterns.
It takes awareness. It takes practice.
But progress is achievable. And it's such a worthy goal for the health and the depth of all your relationships. Remember, progress, not perfection.
So maybe something for you to think about as you go about your week. What would your most challenging conversations look like, feel like, if you consistently prioritize getting your PFC back online before you spoke? What might change?
Definitely something to consider.
Until our next deep dive.